One who slaughters with the Pesach offering with chametz in his possession is in violation of a negative commandment. Rabbi Yehuda says also the daily offering. Rabbi Shimon says if one slaughters a Pesach offering on the 14th under its own designation, he is liable. But if under some other designation, he is not liable. And for all other sacrifices, whether it's slaughtered for their own designation or under some other designation, he is exempt. And if one slaughters the Pesach during the festival under its own designation, he is exempt. Under some other designation, he is liable. And for all other sacrifices, whether slaughtered under their own designations or under some other, he is liable, except for a sin offering, which is slaughtered with others of other designations. Excuse me. The Pesach offering was slaughtered in three groups, where it is written, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall slaughter it. The verse mentions assembly, congregation, and Israel. The first group entered, and when the temple court was filled, they closed the gates of the temple courtyard and sounded the Tekiah Teruah Tekiah. The Kohanim did rows upon rows, and in their hands were silver bowls and golden bowls. One row was altogether of silver, the other row of gold. They were not mixed up together, nor did the bowls have bases, lest they set them down and the blood congealed. Now Yisrael slaughtered it, and the Kohen received it, and he would hand it to his fellow, and he to his fellow. He would accept the full one and return the empty one. The Kohen nearest the altar would throw it with one toss opposite the base. Okay.
Yeah. Yatzasa Kasri Shona. So once the first group of Israelim had finished doing all their korbanos, and they're now carrying their freshly shechted korban Pesach out of the temple to take home and cook, well, home to wherever they're staying in Yerushalayim, because of course the Pesach is not eaten inside the temple; it's eaten anywhere in
Right.
Yerushalayim. It's called Kalim, so it can be eaten anywhere in Yerushalayim. And of course, just practically, you can't have everyone cooking their korban pesach inside the temple. So they leave with their korban and over there on a pole or something like that. And nichnasa kashnia, and next comes the second group. Yatzis hashnia, nichnasa shlishis, and then the second group went out, and the third group would come in. Um, K'maaseh harishona, kach maaseh hashniya v'shlishis, and exactly the process that we just described in the previous Mishnahs is how they did things with the second and third groups. Karu es halel. The Levites would be in there singing and playing instruments. Of course, the Levites are going to have to bring their own korban pesach, but speaking practically, the Levites would probably be part of a group that's got Israel in there who's going to come and do the korban while he's up there singing. Okay, and they would read the whole of Hallel, which is it's questionable what they did for yeah, it seems like the same Hallel that we say today, the Tehillim in order of the Hallel over there, because we're going to see that they're going to quote some of the psukim of Hallel, and
Right.
im gamru shanu, and if they finished the Hallel and they were still busy busy with the procedure, then they would start again and back to the top and carry on singing. Shanu shileshu, and if they finished it a second time, then they would do it a third time. Although that's really a theoretical thing because they never had to repeat it a third time. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, mimehem shel kas shlishis, lo higiu la'ahavti ki yishma Hashem mipnei she'ama mu'atin. Says that in the third group of people, the Levites never even got past ahavti ki yishma Hashem because it was such a small group that the whole procedure would be completed before then. Okay. K'maasehu b'chol kach maasehu b'Shabbos. And just like we just described the procedure on a weekday, but also on Shabbos, they would do it exactly the same. Ela she'hakohanim medichim es ha'azar shelo kirtzon chachamim. But the Kohanim would rinse it just like they did on a weekday because obviously there's going to be a lot of blood around. So they would do a lot of rinsing, and the Chachamim weren't happy with that because they said it was a darabanan. What was the hadacha is because of a shvus. It's because it's a din darabanan because of why what is the actual malacha? Actually, that's um I'm not sure actually what the Av Malacha is that they were worried about with the rinsing of the floor and why that would be considered something that should be Asr Rabbanan. But they said that the Kohanim took the logic and said, look, we're in the temple, we don't worry about Ashvus in the temple. So let's just rinse it. And the Chachamim said, well, actually, we only permit a shvus in the temple when it's a part of the service, when it's needed for the service. Like if you want to repair a harp, okay, that's needed for the service. But rinsing the floor is not needed for the service, and therefore you shouldn't have been doing it. But the Kohanim did it anyway. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Kos hayam memale midam hatarovos. He said, so Rabbi Yehuda says that they would also take a container and scoop up some of the blood on the floor in case of, and they would throw it onto the mizbeach in order to make sure that if somebody accidentally spilled the blood from one of the korbanos, that some of the blood would get onto the mizbeach. V'lo hodu lo chachamim. Chacham said, nah, that's not. Well, you don't just pick up blood and throw it. And well, I guess the halacha would, if you had to come and ask a shaila when the temple gets rebuilt, you'd go with Chachamim on this one. No, you don't throw extra blood on the mizbeach. Okay. Ketzad tolenu mafshitin. Okay, so how do they do the suspending of the animal and the flaying? Because they're going to have to take off those things in the azara, because there's certain parts of every korban that are going to have to go onto the mizbeach. Okay. Unklayos shel barzel hayu kavuin bekasalim u'ba'amodim. So there were metal hooks that were stuck into the walls and the pillars. So there are a whole bunch of these hooks. Shebahen tolin umafshitin. So they would take the animals and hook them onto there to cut off the skin and flay it. And and if they ran out of space, maklos dakim chalakim hayusham. They had a whole bunch of thin poles that they could take. So two guys would stand opposite each other with the two poles over their shoulders, and they would suspend the animal from that, so that they're making themselves into a kind of a makeshift hook over there. You got the picture in your mind. So they put each one has
Right.
poles over their shoulders, and you suspend the animal from these poles, and there you flay them. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Arba'a Asar Shechal Lios b'Shabbos. If the 14th fell on Shabbos, then you couldn't use this either. So it says Rabbi Eliezer that this is not part of the essential service, and therefore he said there's an Issur Rabbanan to do this. Why does he? Let's just see Rabbi Eliezer She'en. Let's see what his. He says b'maklos. Well, Kahati says that these sticks are muktzah, which I don't understand why he would say that they're muktzah if they're designated for this purpose. There must be there's some issue that he says like he doesn't like, and he makes a gezerah darabanan that you shouldn't use these poles on Shabbos. And he says because it's following on the logic that we just said, that it's only if it's part of the Ikar Avoda that we just say that there's no shvus b'mikdash. So he says that if you have the Pesach, the 14th falling on Shabbos, meniach yado al kasef chavero v'yad chavero al kasefo. So they would put their hands instead of poles. So each one would put his hand on his shoulder, and they would suspend the animal from their arms, and then somebody else would come and flay the animal like that. The Chachamim disagree with him and say there's no reason not to use those poles on Shabbos as well.
I would try to get there early to get a spot by the hooks.
Yeah, sounds like a good answer. Okay, base Ches.
So where's it? I missed something here. You said base.
Base Ches, yeah.
We finished already?
Yeah, I finished the three.
All right. So that's why I was off. Okay, I was off. Sorry. Okay, base hit. Flour may not be put into the korosis, nor into the mustard. However, if one did put it in, he must be eaten some immediately, but Rameya forbids this. We may not cook the Pesach offering either in liquids nor in fruit juices, but we may baste and dip it in them. The waters used by a baker must be poured out because they become chametz. These must be removed on Pesach. Babylonian kutak, medium beer, Idman vinegar, Egyptian zizim, dyed broth, cooked dough, and scribe's paste. Rav Elia says also a woman's cosmetics. This is the general rule. Whatever is of the species of grain must be removed on Pesach, and these are in the category of prohibition, but they are not subject to korah. When dough remains in the grooves of the kneading cloth, if there is much as an olive's volume in one place, he must remove it. But if not, it is null because it is of insignificance. And likewise regarding the flaws of combination, if he objects to it, he interposes, but if he desires it to remain, then it is as the trop. Okay, regarding def trop, dough, if there is dough similar to that and has already been leavened, it is forbidden.
Okay. Erevin Gimel Hey.
A person may attach a condition to his Erev and say, if Gentiles come from the east, my Erev is to the west. If from the west, my Erev is to the east. If they come from both directions, I shall go to the place I choose. And if they not come from either direction, I am as my town people. If a scholar comes from the east, my Erev is to the east. From the west, my Erev is to the west. If one comes to here and one goes to there, I shall go to the place where I choose. If to neither direction, I am in my townspeople. Rabbi Yehuda says if one of the scholars was his teacher, he must go to his teacher. But if both were his teachers, he may go to the place he chooses. Eliezer says, if one Yom Tov joins the Sabbath either before or after it, a person may make two Erevim and declare, my Erev is for the first to the east and for the second to the west. For the first to the west and for the second to the east. And my Erev is for the first, but for the second I am to my town people. My Erev is for the second, but not for the first, and I am as my townspeople. The comments say he makes an Erev in one direction, or he makes it in no Erev at all. And either he makes an Erev for both days, or he makes an Erev not at all. Should one proceed, he should take on the first and stay with it until nightfall, then take it and go on the second. He should stay with it until nightfall, then eat it. Thus he benefits in his walking and it benefits from his Erev. If it was eaten on the first, the Erev is valid for the first, but the Erev is not valid for the second. Rabbi Eliezer says, so you agree with me that there are two periods of holiness. Rabbi Yehuda says, if before Rosh Hashanah there was a concern lest Elof be full, and a person may make two Erevim and declare my Erev is for the first to the east and for the second to the west. For the first to the west and for the second to the east. My Erev is for the first, but for the second I am as my town people. Or my Erev is for the second, but for the first I am as my town people. But the Talmud did not agree with him. Okay. Meister Shani.
No, Chala.
Chala, olive gimel. No, olive base.
Yes, yeah.
If one eats of them an olive bulk of matzah on Pesach, he has fulfilled his obligation. An olive bulk of chametz, he is liable to charas. If one of them became mixed up with other kinds, he has to question on Pesach. If one vows to abstain from bread and truma to ruah, they are forbidden to him. So says Reb Meir. But the can come and say if one vows to abstain from dagan, he is permitted from these only, and they are liable to challah and maestros. These are liable to challah, but we are exempt from maestros. Leka, chika, kapea, kefka, maisa rishon, from which its truma has been set aside, maisa sheni and hegdus, which has been redeemed. The reminder of the omer is placed, which is an omer, and the remainder of the omer and produce, which is not reached full of its third of its growth. If Eliezer says produce which has not reached a third of its growth is exempt from challah. These are liable to maestros, but are exempt from challah. Rice, millet, poppy seeds, sesame, pulse, and less than 5/4 of grain. Sponge cakes, honey cakes, paste balls, pancakes, and meduma are exempt from challah. Okay, Yudalad. Regarding a zav, a zava, a nida, or a woman who has given birth, and a mitzvah who died, they convey tuma through maisa to maisa. Until their flesh decays. But a non-Jew who dies is pure conveying tuma through maisa. But Shammai says all women who die are nidos, but Beis Hillel says only one who died when she was a nida is a nida. If a woman died and a reverse of blood flowed out from her, the blood conveys tuma as a blood stain, and it conveys tuma via a roof. Rabbi Yehuda says it does not convey tuma as a blood stain because it became dislodged after she died. But Rabbi Yehuda says, agrees in the case of a woman who was sitting on the birthing stool and died, and reveals the blood flow from her, that conveys tuma as a blood stain. Rabbi Yossi says that therefore it does not convey tuma via a roof. At first, they said a woman who was observing her days of Toya blood may pour water for the Pesach offering. They subsequently changed it to say, with regard to the Doshim, she who was who was like someone touched by one who was rendered to him by a corpse, in accordance with the words of Beisilo. But the comments say, what Beit Shammai says, she is even like one who himself was rendered to me by a corpse. Corpse. Okay. Test. A Bakor received 2 shares of the father's property, but does not receive 2 shares of the mother's property. Neither does he receive 2 shares of the improvement of what is fit to become from as what is already in his possession. Neither does a woman collect a kasuba from these, nor the daughters of the sustenance, nor the yavam. None of them received an improvement, nor of wheat is of what is fit to become as far as what is already in his possession. These do not revert in Yovel, the share of the Makor, one who inherits his wife, one who performs Yibum with his brother's wife, and a gift. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. But the Kakamas say a gift is like a sale. Rabbi Elias says they all revert to Yovel. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Yoka says one who inherits his wife must return it to the members of the family, and he must deduct from the price they pay. The Maisha of animals supplied in the land of Israel and out of the land, when the temple is in existence and when it is not in existence, and it is taken from ordinary animals and not from consecrated ones. It applies to both cattle and flocks, but one may not be taken as Maisha for the other, and to sheep and goats, which may be taken as Maisha for each other to both new animals and old ones. And one may not be taken as Maisha for the other. It might have been argued that if the new animals and old animals which are not collide with each other, they yet not serve as Maisha for each other, then it is not logical that sheep and goats, which are kalayim with each other, may surely not be taken as mice for each other. Thus, Scripture says, and states and flocks, implying that all types of flocks are considered as one. The mice of animals is drawn from within the area that
we've done 3.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. And kitchen, we are in Vav Hay. If one says, write a get and give it to my wife, divorce her, or write a letter and give it to her, they may write and give it to her. If he said, release her, provide for her, do for her as customary, or do for her as is proper, he did not say anything. Originally, they said if one goes out and changes and says, write a get for my wife, they write and give it. They later said also one who sets out to sea and one who lives in a caravan. But Shimon Shari says also one who is endangered. If one was thrown into a pit and he said that whoever hears his voice should get right again for his wife, it shall write and give it. If a healthy man says, write a gift for my wife who desired to taunt her, it happened that a healthy man said, write a gift for my wife, and he went up to the top of the roof and it fell and died. Shimon Gamaliel said, the sages said they fell on his own, it is a get. If the wind pushed him, it is not a get. But someone said to 2 persons, give a get to my wife, or to 3, write a get and give it to my wife, they shall write and give it. If he said to 3, give a wet get to my wife, they shall tell others to write it because he's designated as a court. These are the words of Umeya. Chanina of Ono brought this law from prison. I have a tradition concerning one who says to 3, give a get to my wife, as they tell others to write it, because he designated them as a court. Said Rabbi Yossi, we said to the messenger, we also have a tradition that even if he said to the great court in Jerusalem, give a get to my wife, they must learn, write, and give it. If he said to them, write a get for my wife, one writes and 2 sign. If he said, all of you write, one writes and they all sign. Therefore, if one of them died, the get is null. Okay.
And that's it.
You're going to be home most of the day today, or?